Okay, so I am just going to take you through just sort of the basics then, really, about action learning. And I thought I'd kick off by just talking a little bit about what action learning is. Um, so really the simplest way that I've come up with to describe it is it's like a form of group coaching. So if any of you have done coaching before, if you imagine that instead of just having one coach working with you, asking really insightful questions to help you sort of unlock, some new thinking, it's more like having a team of brilliant coaches. So imagine having like six or seven other people working with you to help you make those big decisions to unravel that thinking. And that's really you're in the you're in the right ballpark. So that's really how I would think about action learning. It was invented in the 1940s, which gosh is nearly 100 years ago now, isn't it? By a man who has a very 1940s name, a man called Reg Revens, who was a scientist who then changed careers and became a management consultant, but also found time to be an Olympic long jump athlete, so bizarrely. And what he did when when he introduced action learning was he took some of the learning that he had as a scientist, where he had he'd noticed that scientists regularly sort of peer reviewed their experiment results. And he adopted that same sort of approach and transferred it to his work as a management consultant. And at the time, he was doing lots of work with the National Coal Board. And so he started to put managers from different coal mines into peer groups to sort of learn from each other and to sort of share what had happened at their pits, and he noticed that the productivity and the health and safety records improved in the pits, in the mines where those managers were part of these what have subsequently become known as action learning sets. So as a scientist, very empirical, sort of tested the results. So that's where it came from a long time ago now. What basically action learning is and isn't, I thought it might be useful to sort of talk about that. It's not just talking in the way that you might talk with your colleagues, with people that you trust. It's more than that. It's not just sort of telling. It's not just telling a story about what's going on for you. What it actually is it's a structured process. It's very structured. I used to describe it as it's almost like the closest thing to sort of talking yoga, as you can imagine, because there's a stillness and a slowness to it and a rigor to it. And it's not just about talking in a kind of unstructured way. It's about very careful listening. It's about what's called active listening, which we'll talk about a bit more should you decide to join one of the sets. It's about asking open questions. So questions that can only be answered with a full answer, can't be answered with a yes or no. So it's about asking each other really open and insightful questions. It's about giving each other very thoughtful feedback. And it's really important that people come willingly. So action learning isn't for everyone. But it when it happens with a bunch of people who are really committed to it, it can be amazing. So we ask people to commit to attending regularly, because the more often you meet, the stronger the bonds of trust that emerge, and the more open people can be about the things they want to discuss. But it's also about very high levels of challenge and support. So what we're trying to do through action learning is sort of disrupt people's thinking, enable them to kind of think about things in a way that's different to the way that they might do normally, to sort of disrupt that thinking a little bit. And we do that by offering a very sort of, I always talk about it as very gentle challenging, or just cheerleading them to feel more confident about doing something that's maybe a bit different to what they would normally do. So there's a real sort of discipline in the process that you'll recognize as you get stuck in. And the principles of action learning. So I mentioned that Reg Revens, who invented it in the 40s, was a scientist. So of course he had an equation for it, and the equation is up there on the screen for you. So it's basically learning, so that comes from programmed knowledge and questioning insights. So L equals learning, and that's made up of programmed knowledge, the P, and questioning insight, the Q. And what that really means in everyday terms is that so action learning is based on the idea that people have an unlimited capacity to learn from experience. if you can reflect on your experiences, then there's untold learning to happen there. But normally we have a much more limited capacity to learn from being taught. So if you think about, you are taught that eating healthily is really good for you, but you may not actually change your diet until you experience something yourself that makes you realize how important it is. It's that kind of knowledge. So, in terms of how action learning can be helpful, particularly, I suppose, in the context of the Years of Culture program, is that as people get busier, so as you sort of as you come out of your years or while you're in it, we're working really, really fast. We're on to the next thing. There's a constant kind of hamster wheel of activity. And that means that it can be really hard to reflect on our personal experiences, on our organizational experiences, to kind of recognize success, or, where things didn't go so well, and to sort of understand what went behind that. Same goes for, what are we going to do next? How can we best apply our experience? And so it's really, action learning is a way to sort of encourage reflection and to embed learning in a way that feels, I always think action learning is a little bit magical, but it sort of just embeds the learning. And sometimes you can just see the light bulb go on above people's head as they have this kind of, new realization. So action learning provides the time and the structure and a set of really supportive peers to enable that kind of reflection and learning to happen. And I would say that what it really does is it enables people to hear their own story very differently. You might hear yourself when you're presenting something, when you're talking about something that's kind of, going on in your head. You may hear yourself say things that you've never heard yourself say before. And it gives you the opportunity to kind of stop and notice that. And once you've heard your story differently, or once you've heard yourself say something new, then you can create different responses. You can start to move in a different direction. Your self-awareness becomes, enhanced, and you can be open to very different possibilities in yourself and in others. And it can be useful in that way, both for people who are working within a team, but also for people who are working in a freelance capacity, who sometimes don't have that kind of support structure, those people to sort of bounce ideas off of. So just going to talk you through very quickly what you can expect from a fairly standard, from an action learning set that we'd be running. So first off, a little bit of reporting in, which is sort of an action learning version of how are we all, what's going on. Normally, I would encourage people to just say out loud anything that they want to sort of leave outside the room so that they can really be present in the session. Then we have a sort of what I often call a bidding process, which is where the facilitator will invite you to let the group know if there's anything that you would like to talk about in this session. So basically, what will happen in each session is that one person will get the opportunity to bring something to the group that they need some help with, and everyone will get the opportunity to do that at least once during the duration of the project. And normally what happens there is it's all very polite at the beginning. And I would say, so does anybody have anything to present? And we would all be very British and very reserved. And we'd all sit there thinking, no, my thing isn't important enough. And then somebody will very tentatively, probably in the early days, put their hand up, which you don't need to do in action learning, and say, well, I've got something. But I mean, I really don't need to talk about it. If somebody else has got something, then, absolutely fine for them to go. I really don't mind. And then the floodgates open. And before you know it, you've got two or three people who might be interested in presenting. And then again, through a sort of process of action learning magic, we just very democratically decide on who's going to present. That's what we call it when people bring a thing to a meeting, who's going to present in that session. Then we go into the main part of the session, which would last about an hour or so, which is the action learning conversation, where we get into the thing that the presenter needs some help with. And I'll come on to what happens in the conversation in a minute. And then at the end of that, we do a little bit of sort of process review, where we review how the conversation went, what it was like to be a presenter, what it was like to be facilitating, whether there are any things that we did really well, whether there are any little action learning tips that we might want to share with each other, so that next time we can just gradually, all the time, we're gradually improving our action learning process. And then we'll just talk about next dates and things like that. So very sort of practical thing at the end. And that will take about an hour and a half. And the plan is that we will meet once a month online. So that's basically what you can expect in a session. And in an action learning conversation, this is basically what happens. This is the kind of the rigor and the structure that I talked about. And the way that I think about this is that it's in three sections. So if you imagine you have an hour, and the first 10 to 15 minutes are about part one, then about half an hour for the main part, and then the third section is another 10 to 15 minutes. So you've got sort of 15 minutes, 30 minutes, 15 minutes. And the first layer, if you like, the first part of the session is the initial presentation. So that is the person who's we've decided their thing is going to be the thing that we explore in the session. They present. That doesn't mean they come with slides and whizzy charts and everything like that. It's just words tumbling out of your head or out of your mouth. And it's often quite stream of consciousness. You know, if things are if you can talk really lucidly about something, the chances are you may not need help with it. So it's not uncommon for people to sort of start a sentence and not know what's going to come out at the end of it. So we do that for about 5 to 10 minutes. And then there are some clarifying questions. And those are questions which are about the facts of the thing that the presenter has just talked about. So very factual questions that we as a set think we need to ask the presenter. And we all chip in. So all the set members, you might say, let's say the proposition was around, I don't know, somebody's been offered a new job or something like that. There might be some factual questions around how far, how often would you need to be in the office? How long's the travel time? When do you need to let them know by? Those sorts of very factual things. And I should have said at the beginning, each conversation is facilitated by somebody. And initially that will be James or I. But then as the sets progress, you'll take it in turns to facilitate a conversation as well, with James and I kind of supporting you. It's a bit like when you have driving lessons and you've got a sort of, you've got a driving instructor with a second set of pedals. James and I would be the driving instructor. So we do the initial presentation, then the clarifying questions, and hopefully by that point, at the end of sort of 10 to 15 minutes, we all understand what it is that is there to be discussed. Then we move into the main section of the action learning conversation, which is all about open questions. So this is where we ask questions of the person who's presenting. And I'll talk a little bit about open questions in a second, but they're essentially questions that can't be answered with a yes or a no. So if you've had coaching before, you'll recognize that a coach will often ask you questions which are designed to expand your thinking. And it's exactly the same with action learning. So all we can do in that 25 to 30 minute moment is ask questions. We can't offer advice. We can't offer personal reflections. We can't do anything like that. And quite often, if you're someone that is used to solving problems, you'll find that really tricky and you have to kind of sit on your hands and it doesn't matter how obvious you think the answer is. The goal of action learning is to enable the person to arrive at the conclusions themselves. So our job as their fellow set members is just to ask questions that we think will unlock the thinking that we think will be helpful to them. So we do that for about 25 minutes. And again, we all just chip in. There's no need to sort of put your hand up. There's no need to go through the chair. You just kind of watch out for what's going on in the room and ask your question when you think it would be useful. And then right at the very end of that, the facilitator will invite the presenter to just say out loud any actions that they've identified for themselves. So it might be, yes, it might be they say something like, oh yeah, I've realized I really need to go and do this, or I need to do that, or it was really useful to hear myself say this, so I'm going to go do that. So they set themselves some actions, and the facilitator may also have captured them along the way, just saying, oh yeah, I really must do that. And that's the chance where the facilitator can kind of share that stuff with them as well. And then we go into the third part of the conversation, which is all about reflection. And it's sort of like a game of reflection ping pong here. So we start with the presenter, and the facilitator will just invite the presenter to just share some initial reflections. might be what they've heard themselves say. It might just be, oh gosh, it's such a relief to get that out there and to share that. It might be, thanks guys, you were brilliant, something like that. Whatever is their kind of very initial kind of decompression sort of reflection. And then we go out to the group, so all of the other set members, your 6 or 7 set members that you've got with you, and they share 2 reflections with the presenter and the rest of the group. And the first reflection is something that they want to share with the presenter that they think is kind of that will be helpful and useful to them. And that's where the cheerleading or the challenging comes in. So it's either something which is gently challenging. I noticed that when you talked about scenario 1, you were really slumped back in your chair and you looked really deflated. But when you were talking about option number 2, you look much more animated. It could be something like that. So I would encourage you to think about option 2. It could be something like that. Or it could be a cheerleading thing. It could be something along the lines of, you said that you weren't really confident about your skills in that way, but actually you just described it. You're totally acing it. You've totally got this. It could be something like that. So that's the first reflection that you offer. And then the second reflection is something that you are taking away from the conversation for yourself. Because very often talking about somebody else's thing helps you unlock some thinking about your own stuff. You'll know that if you talk to a friend about a problem, you often have little light bulb moments yourself. So the 2 things that you share are something for the presenter and something that you're taking away for yourself. And we just go around the group. So everybody takes it in turn to do that. And the presenter just listens to the reflections that they're hearing. And then we go back to the presenter for a final set of their reflections. And that's often them sort of responding to something that they've maybe heard from the group as they've sort of shared their reflections with them. So it's a kind of ping pong thing. And that is what a normal action learning conversation will look like for us in these sets. And they'll last about an hour or so, something like that. So I've talked a lot about open questions. So this is broadly speaking how an open question is structured. So it starts with one of these words that you'll see on the screen. So either a question that starts with what, or a when, or a who, or a where, a why, or a how. So every single question that you ask them needs to start with that. And when you first begin on your action learning journey, it might be quite tricky. And quite often you'll see people say, oh, I really know what I want to ask, but I can't quite phrase it in that way. And the facilitator can help you with that. But also it's just practice and you'll get much, much easier. You'll get much more fluent at it. And you'll probably notice that you start doing it in other conversations as well in your everyday life. You'll become a much better sort of question asker than you might be at the beginning. And as I said, absolutely no advice giving. So your toolkit are those 6 words: what, when, who, where, how, and why. And once you've signed up to an action learning set, we'll have a little practice session where you'll get to just practice having a go at asking these sort of open questions. As I said, there's always a facilitator in the conversation. And initially it will be James and I, and then you'll take it in turns. After the first conversation, you will each have the chance to facilitate a set, but also present. So everybody, by the time you get to the end of the program, you will have both facilitated and presented at least once. And the role of the facilitator is basically to make sure that the conversation goes really well, or as well as it can do, for the presenter. So you will outline the length of the conversation so that everybody is clear about how long it's going to last. You'll keep things moving to time, keep it running to those times, and you'll move the group from one section of the conversation to the next one. You'll make sure that there are only open questions. So it's perfectly fine, and in fact is encouraged if you spot when you're facilitating, if you spot someone asking a closed question or giving advice, then you can totally jump in and say, I'm sorry, there's no advice given. Would you like to reframe what you've just offered as an open question? You capture actions along the way. So if you're listening to the presenter, and if you hear them say, oh, that's a great idea, yeah, I should do that, then you scribble that down so that you can share that with them afterwards. And you intervene when needed. So if the questions are coming thick and fast, which can sometimes be the case when you start action learning, because people are they've got such a great question, they want to get it out there, or the presenter is just so desperate to get any answer out that they'll just blurt something out because they're feeling the pressure. It's just to kind of slow things down and make sure we're moving at a nice pace. When I first started action learning, when I was learning training to do it, I went first. I was the first presenter in my group. And honestly, I was just so relieved when somebody asked me a question. I just literally said the first thing that came into my head because I just felt like I was in the spotlight. But it isn't like that at all. Actually, if you can relax into it, it's just amazing. Because when do you have seven people just listening to you, just being there to help you figure your stuff out? It's such a privilege to present. Um, but the facilitator is there to just kind of keep the pace nice and steady, to make sure that we don't stray too much from the thing that the presenter wants, and also to just as I say, model good questions. So sometimes as a facilitator, if there is a silent, a silence that feels too long, you might just jump in with a question that you have ready. And you'll all get the chance to do this. It sounds like a lot. Actually, in most cases, you're just keeping time because the set kind of looks after itself and does everything for itself. But as I say, and you will get one, you'll see James and I do it once or twice too before you have to do it yourselves. So just talking about this program specifically, as you know, there are four action learning sets. All of them will run between May this year and February next year, and they'll meet once a month. And we've chosen different days and of the week and different times of the day to give you as much flexibility as possible. And all the dates are on the web page. Each of those sets will be facilitated by James or I. So we will act as your sort of guide facilitators. And along the way, we will help you develop your action learning skills and your confidence as presenters, facilitators, and set members. Um, so, and as I said, each action learning set will be for 1.5 hours each month. And our goal with this is not just to give you the chance to kind of do that reflection and embed that learning that we talked about your years of culture related work, but also to equip you with the skills and the confidence and the general know-how to continue meeting as a set independently of James or I, should you want to afterwards, and or set up your own new action learning set so that you might want to do with colleagues, with people that are based more locally in the area that you work in. It could be that you go on to set up a set with people who do the same thing as you, but might be scattered all around the country. So, as well as just doing these action learning conversations interspersed across the year or across the 9 months, will be more sort of training focused sessions. So, for instance, we'll do a session on difficult scenarios you might find yourself in as a facilitator. We'll run a session on all the things you need to think about if you are setting up a set so that you have all the wherewithal that you need to be able to carry on after we've finished or to go on and become, to facilitate new sets that you might set up. All of this, as I said, will be happening on Zoom, and we will run until February 2026, meeting once a month. I talked a little bit about our approach. So we want you to learn through doing. So by doing that, by doing action learning every month. And also we really want to, as I said, create that legacy, which is why we've included skills-based sessions in there so that you can carry on afterwards. The kinds of things that you can expect from your fellow action learning set members and that they can expect from you are confidentiality and commitment. So it probably goes without saying, but I will say anyway that anything that gets discussed in an action learning set is confidential. And should you decide to join a set, we'll go into that in a bit more detail in the sort of initial introduction session. You can expect to be fully supported by your other set members, to present and facilitate at least once, to learn how to set up and lead your own action learning set in the future. And in fact, some people that I've worked with in the past have gone on to include action learning in the portfolio of things that they do. So they've gone on to become action learning facilitators. You'll develop new skills and confidence, and hopefully a new network as well. and you should have everything that you need to be able to carry on meeting afterwards. Just as a final thing, the recruitment process, as you know, it's fairly simple. So you can, well, very simple. There's a very short expression of interest form, and I'll share the link to that in a minute. But that's also the link to that is on the web page and in the email that you've received. You can apply either by filling in that form or by sending us a video application if you'd rather do that. The deadline for that is midnight on the 20th of April, and it will take about 5 minutes, I think, to fill in that form or do the video. And then in terms of what happens then, we'll get back to you by the Wednesday of that week, by the 23rd. And what we'll do initially is we'll allocate you to a set on a provisional basis. We'll send that information to you along with a little bit of information about all of your set members. And that's the point where if you spot a potential conflict of interest, so let's say there's a client in there or there's somebody that you've worked with in the past and you feel like it would be a bit uncomfortable working with them again, that's the opportunity for you to tell us confidentially that you feel like there is a conflict of interest. And if that's the case, we will just work with you to find you another set so that you can be in a set where you feel comfortable, that you can share, speak openly, be yourself. And so we'll need a few days just to kind of line that up. It's fine to be in sets with people you know. It's just if you think there's something about that relationship that means that you wouldn't feel comfortable or feel that you could be open. So we will then confirm the final set membership the following week, the week of the 28th of April. And then the first group training session, just where we were talking a bit more depth about action learning and you'll get to have a go at the open questions, will be on the 8th of May. And then your action learning sets would start the following week. So we should be up and running we will be up and running by the middle of May. So that is the end of the slides. I don't know if anybody has got any questions or observations or reflections, or if you've been in action learning before and you want to sort of share a bit about that. Oh, thanks, James. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, ignore the double copying of the action learning fact link because I've managed to put that in twice. But yes, the link.
Very efficient.
Yeah, the Google Docs is there. Yeah, I think it's great summary, Julia. And I think while people are thinking of questions, if they have questions, I've always talk about action learning sets having sort of 6 principles. One is about believing in the resourcefulness of the presenter, believing in yourself and everyone else in the room, giving them the confidence to really believe in their own ability to solve their issues with their own resources. And that comes from a genuine need for generosity from everyone, that we can do that. And it's presenter-led and participant-enabled, and that really is powerful. And it comes from a non-directive, non-leading openness, and that's really lovely to have in a workplace. Sometimes something we don't really find openness, and it's non-judgmental, it's respectful, and as Julia says, confidential. So it's a really lovely thing to get involved in if you want to do so.
The amazing thing is that you very quickly go from being even on Zoom. I mean, Zoom, it's really interesting. Obviously everything went onto Zoom at the pandemic, and before that, I used to do some action learning on Zoom, but mostly in person. But almost the thing that's, I mean, there are pros and cons to both versions, but the fact that you're on Zoom and you're in gallery setting means that you can see everybody really clearly. Whereas normally in action learning, if you're meeting as a group, you meet in a circle, and there's always, I know it sounds silly, but it's always somebody in your blind spot. So there's always the chance that you're going to miss somebody wanting to jump in if you're, facilitating. So Zoom actually weirdly creates an intimacy that sometimes isn't there, or a different kind of intimacy to doing it in person. But it's amazing how quickly you go from being a group of 6 or 7 people who maybe knew each other a little bit, but might not, or you might be complete strangers, to people that you can share like the most some really personal stuff, within the professional context, because the trust levels normally they go through the roof really, really quickly. It's amazing how quickly those sort of bonds of trust get established because of the way it works. Any questions? Or I saw that somebody said they're in. That's great. No
Sally's
questions.
saying no questions, but she wants to be involved, so that's all good. You don't need to have questions at this point.
No.
And just to be clear, they don't have to be open questions either. You can
No, they could be really as closed as you like this time,
really
for
difficult
once.
closed questions that we just have yes and no to. But if as long as everyone's happy, that sounds great. It was a great summary.
Sounds great. Yeah, I'm in. I've done a little bit before of this, but I'm definitely up for it. So yeah.
That's great. And the other thing I would say is if you think, having heard a little bit more about it now, if you think there are other people in your team or just other people that you know through the work that you've been doing on your year of culture who might have been involved in a different one, whether they're working in a freelance capacity or as part of a team, please do forward that email that we sent to you onto them because, it's open to anyone that's involved in action learning. And I often think that the sets that are the most, I was going to say valuable, I mean, that open up the thinking the most are those that have a real diversity of set members. So people who come at it from very different starting points, because actually that's how you get really disruptive thinking. So, kind of the more the merrier, and the more different types of experience in a set, the better. So please do sort of share it with other colleagues as well, because we would love to see as many people as possible get involved in this. So yeah, please do spread the word. And I think we're going to send a little reminder email out this afternoon to everyone. So if you can't find the original email, that will be in your inbox by the end of the day.
Sandra, you unmuted. Do you have a question?
No, I was just, when Miriam was saying she was in, I was just going to go, me too.
Oh, excellent.
Oh, great.
Well, that's good. That's good. I'm glad we picked up the unmuting there. That's good.
I missed the first couple of minutes. I was having tech issues. So did I see it's being recorded?
It's been recorded and we'll send that out to you. Yeah.
Great. And I'll probably share that with some colleagues as well, Lena, because that's a couple of people I can think of who'd be interested.
Amazing. And you'll have to do that now because it's on the recording, Sandra. So
okay.
You're being held to account already. Great stuff. What if we do?
Can I just say
yes.
Yeah, can I just say hello, Frank Darnley? It's been a long time.
Hello, yes it has.
Frank, you need to move you into a separate session. You can catch up together.
That's cool. You can count me in. I think I've already sent the form back.
I think you have, Deborah. Yeah. Great stuff. Thank you. Amazing. Well, any final thoughts? No. Great stuff. Sorry, go on, James.
Yeah, just saying. Look forward to seeing some of you in the action learning sets later on this year. It'll be really good fun.
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming. And if anything occurs to you afterwards that you didn't want to say anything out loud now, feel free to just email me, and I'm really happy to take any questions that you've got that way as well.
I'm going to put your
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Take care. Thank you.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.